Hey guys, it's Christy with Christy's Custom Creations, and today I want to show everyone how I made this glittery beach tumbler with waves. It is super easy to make and super beautiful. This is actually one of my best selling tumblers here, and being in the Florida Panhandle area, everyone loves a beachy tumbler. So I'm going to get started with a 30-ounce stainless steel tumbler. So I went ahead and prepped this tumbler and I spray painted it 4 different colors. I spray painted blue on the top, kind of a teal or light blue in the center. I painted the very bottom gold, and then the white strip around it, I just used some white and painted that white. And all 4 paints are from Rust-Oleum, and you don't have to have the exact same colors, just a blue, a teal, a white, and a gold will work just fine. So now I'm going to take a very small amount of my favorite epoxy, Tumblerpoxy, and I mixed it up, and I'm going to put a nice thin layer of epoxy on the entire cup. And then after that, I'm going to smooth out, just make sure that you have a really good coverage over the cup. I always like to take one finger, start at the bottom, and work my way up the cup, circling as the cup spins around, just making sure that I get it nice and smooth over the entire cup. And then I take a couple little swipes with my finger and on the bottom. So then I take my blowtorch, pop any little micro bubbles that may be trying to hang out, and then it's going to be time for glitter. So most of the glitters that I'm going to be using today are from BJ's Glitter. This first color we're going to start off with is called Bora Bora, and it is a beautiful chunky blue mix, and it's got a little bit of holographic tones to it. And I'm just going to sprinkle it freely around the top portion of the cup where I have my blue spray painted area at. And I mean, our paint is basically just, marking the areas where our glitter is going to go. So you just want to sprinkle that very freely over this area. After that, we are going to move on to the next color. The next color is a really beautiful tealish color, and it's called Thirsty Turtle. It is absolutely stunning, and it's a very similar glitter to the blue chunk, the Bora Bora. It's very similar, it's just obviously a different color. It's a beautiful teal. So you're going to sprinkle that pretty freely around the teal portion of the cup here, just underneath the blue, and you can kind of try to overlap them ever so slightly. It helps to overlap them a little because it helps kind of blend them together. After that, I'm going to move in with my gold. This gold here is called Poppin' Bottles. It's from Berry Humble Glitter, and I wish I'd known it at the time, but BJ's Glitter has a beautiful glitter called Sand Dollar, and it's just a beautiful mix that really would have been perfect for the bottom. I just didn't have it at the time, so I used Poppin' Bottles, which, hey, it turned out absolutely stunning. So I'm not mad about it. I really like Poppin' Bottles, but I do wish I had used Sand Dollar on this cup. I wish I'd had it at the time because it is stunning. It is perfect for a sandy color if you need a sandy color glitter. After that, I'm going to go in with my white. And of course, it's my favorite white in the world, Opalina. So I'm going to go in with Opalina, and I am just going to sprinkle super freely. I want to definitely overlap the Opalina over the gold and on the bottom part of the teal. I like how the Opalina kind of gives a different shift to the glitter where it overlaps. So as you can see, I overlap it, and the excess will fall off, but the epoxy will also help to grab it. I also want to mention that I have a special one-time only discount code for BJ's Glitter, and I will post that down in the description box below for everyone to use. It's good for 30% off. So once I have my glitter on there, I'm going to just take a piece of wax paper. You can take wax paper, parchment paper, a gloved hand. I really like to use wax paper because I feel like I've got pretty good control with it. And I'm just going to kind of press gently on that chunky glitter to help it lay flat. You want to do that because otherwise you're going to have to use a crazy amount of epoxy to get the chunky glitter to lay flat. So I basically just take this wax paper and gently push on there and lay it down. And this is just a close-up of how beautiful this glitter is. So once that is dry, I'm going to take 30 milliliters of epoxy, and as I mentioned previously, this is Tumblerpoxy epoxy. It's my favorite epoxy that I use for pretty much everything. So I mixed up 30 milliliters of it, and I am going to smooth it out over the cup. I personally like to get it over the chunky area first, just because the chunky area seems to take up the most epoxy, and I just want to make sure I have really good coverage up there. And then once I get my epoxy on that part, I move down to the rest of the glitter on the bottom portion of the cup. Really doesn't matter how you put it on. That's how I like to put it on there. So make sure you get really super good coverage over the entire cup, especially over that chunky glitter, because you don't want to miss any spots. It's going to be a pain to try to cover up later if you do. And don't forget the bottom of the cup either. Always got to get it on that bottom. So once I am pretty sure that I've got pretty decent coverage on there, I'm going to take just one finger, just like I always do, start at the bottom and push up as the cup rotates, just smoothing the epoxy down. You don't want to start at the top of the cup and work your way down, because then you're going to push epoxy inside your cup, which will create more work for you in the end. You will just have to try to get all the epoxy out. So once you have it smooth, make sure to smooth it out on the bottom as well. And I then take my blowtorch, which I bought on Amazon, and I'm going to make a super quick pass over the whole cup. Make sure you don't hang out too long in any areas. You just want to make it quick because you don't want to burn the epoxy, but just pop any little micro bubbles, and that helps the epoxy just lay super smooth as well. So I'm going to let the cup spin for about 6 to 8 hours before I put a second coat of epoxy on the cup. Now for this second coat of epoxy, I'm going to do the exact same thing that I just did for the first coat over the glitter, and I have mixed up 30 milliliters of Tumblerpoxy epoxy, and I'm just going to spread it freely over the cup, getting really good coverage. You don't need me to give you another explanation as to how I did it, so I'm just going to stay quiet and let you watch me epoxy this cup. All right, check out how gorgeous this glitter is under 2 coats of epoxy. I just cannot get over how beautiful this glitter is. So once I have let my cup completely dry, I mean, it needs to be dry, I'm going to sand it. I let it dry for about 10 to 12 hours. If you don't have it dry, it's going to kind of want to gum up on you if you try sanding it. So I take a piece of 220 grit sandpaper. I also buy this sandpaper on Amazon. I love it. It is the only sandpaper that I use. It has an adhesive back to it, so it's sticky, so it sticks nicely to my fingers. So it makes it really easy to use. It doesn't slide around while I'm sanding. And because we had a chunky glitter up top, you want to make sure and pay close attention to that top rim. You want to really get up there and knock down any little prickly spots, because you don't want any glitter poking your customers in the mouth. So after that, I work my way around the bottom, and you want to be careful around the bottom. You don't want to overdo it, because you don't want to, sand down to the metal at all, the stainless steel. So after I'm pretty happy with the bottom, I'm going to make my way around just the entire cup, making sure it's super smooth, and then I'll work back on the rim some more. I want it just very nice and smooth, and don't sand too deep that you damage your glitter, but sand enough to smooth it out. And if you have any little spots that are trying to be stubborn up around the top rim, you can take a craft knife or a flat blade, a flat razor, and just just run around the rim of the cup with it, and that'll really make it a lot easier to clean up as well. As you can see, I decided that the rim here needed just a little bit of extra loving with that sandpaper just to smooth it out a little bit more. So I completely forgot to record this part. Don't really know what I was thinking, but I forgot to record washing the cup after I sand it. So to wash it, I take it in the bathroom and I always just wash it down really good with some Dawn dish soap, dry it completely, and then it will be ready for this next step here. So I have 30 milliliters of Tumblerpoxy mixed up, and I really like to put my Tumblerpoxy into these little bottles. They're honey bottles that I got on Amazon. It makes it so much easier to squeeze out, and they don't leak. It's the first bottle that I've found that doesn't leak. They are amazing. So I will link those down in the description box below. So I have got 30 milliliters of Tumblerpoxy epoxy mixed up here, and I am just going to make sure it is thoroughly mixed, and then it is going to be time to separate it out because we are going to do some super cool stuff with the tumbler right now. So with a little medicine cup, I'm going to separate a small amount of epoxy from our mixed epoxy. And I poured about 10 milliliters of epoxy here into the small medicine cup. So next I'm going to take some Alumilite white opaque dye, and I'm going to mix it into that small amount of epoxy, that approximately 10 milliliters of epoxy that we have set aside in the medicine cup. And this thing is really super hard to squeeze out, but you don't need much. I think I only used like 2 or 3 drops of the Alumilite dye in there. And I actually bought this dye on Amazon, and so I will link that down in the description box below so it's easier for you to find. So after you get a couple drops in there, I think I used like 2 or 3 drops, just make sure and mix it up really super good and set it to the side because we are going to be using it here in just a little while. So the remainder of epoxy that we have mixed up, it's about 20 milliliters or so of epoxy. I'm going to go ahead and take that and just spread it over the entire cup, getting really good coverage. You don't want to miss any areas. And after that, we're going to move on to the alcohol ink step. Once you've got really good coverage, just take your gloved finger and smooth the epoxy down all the way around the cup as it spins, starting at the bottom and working your way to the top. Once you get done with that, take your blowtorch, make a super quick pass, pop in any micro bubbles, and just making sure that the epoxy is laying nice and smooth. Now it's time for the fun part, alcohol inks. So this first one is called Mermaid, the next one is called Baja Blue, and the last one is called Stonewashed. So Mermaid and Stonewashed are both Ranger alcohol inks, and the Baja Blue is a Pinata ink. So I'm just going to start off with uncapping all 3 of them. Make sure that you shake them up really good so that the colorant in it is mixed thoroughly before you start dropping it onto the cup. So I like to use the blues up top over the blue chunky glitter, and you just kind of drop randomly all over the cup. Doesn't have to be any rhyme or reason. And I do kind of try to get a couple little drops right up around the rim where you've sanded, just in case you sanded any of that glitter a little bit too much. It just helps to hide it if you did. Not saying that you did, if you did. So next, I've got the Mermaid, and I just kind of drop that randomly. I personally like to keep the Mermaid for the most part over the teal glitter. And then you're going to do the same thing with the other one as well, the Stonewashed. And there doesn't have to be any kind of rhyme or reason. I do drop a little bit of the mermaid up top around the blue, but just you'll see what you like. As you drop it on there, you'll see how the alcohol ink kind of changes the color of the glitter. So just drop it on there randomly, and if you feel like it needs more, give it a little bit more. So once I'm pretty happy with the amount of alcohol ink that I have on the tumbler here, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the waves. So that little bit of epoxy that we mixed up earlier with the Alumilite white dye, I'm just going to take that with a popsicle stick and I'm just going to drizzle it freely over the cup. And I like to drizzle it side to side as I go over the cup. And there doesn't have to be any kind of rhyme or reason with it at all. It's going to mix in with the alcohol ink a little bit, but it's going to just really create some cool colors and shapes, waves, all that as it kind of moves around the cup. And you do want to make sure that you don't put too much on there, because if you put too much on there, it's going to hide your glitter basically. So just less is more, and if you decide you need more after you get this amount on there, you can always add more to it. So I'm just going to take my heat gun really quick. I'm going to take my blowtorch really quick and just make a really quick pass over the cup, which will pop any little micro bubbles that are hanging in there. And then from there, I'm going to take my heat gun, and I have my heat gun set on medium setting, and it's obviously blowing hot air, but I'm going to use the air that's being pushed out of my heat gun, and I'm going to use it to push up as I go up the cup, which will create waves and swirls. As the heat and the pressure from the air hits it, it's just going to make this alcohol ink and then the white Alumilite dye do some really cool stuff as it all mixes together. Now, if a medium setting is not enough for you with your heat gun, you can turn your heat gun up to high just to get more air pushed out. You just want to be careful not to burn up your epoxy. So look how beautiful this cup is. I'm going to let it spin until it dries completely, and then after that I'm going to put a final coat of epoxy over all of this. Now you will note that it will be a little bit lumpy when it dries, most likely just because of the alcohol ink, so it will need one more coat of epoxy over it to just help smooth it out. The alcohol ink kind of makes the epoxy, I don't know if like separates the right word for it, but it just kind of makes the cup a little bit wavy. So you want your cup to be nice and smooth, not wavy, not bumpy or anything like that for your customers. So for this final coat of epoxy, once the last one with the alcohol ink mixture and everything, once that was dry, completely dry, I think I waited about 8 or 10 hours, I'm going to add this last final coat of epoxy on here, and it is 30 milliliters of epoxy. And again, I used Tumblerpoxy epoxy, and I'm just going to get really good coverage. Make sure and get super good coverage because this is the final coat on here. And if you want to, prior to this final coat, you can always add a saying on here onto the cup, some kind of beachy saying, sandy toes, salty kisses, whatever you want to put on there. Just some kind of cute beachy saying. I did not want to take away from the beauty of this cup, so I am leaving it as it is. So once I get my epoxy on there, I'm just going to take my blowtorch, pop any micro bubbles, making sure that this final coat of epoxy is flawless. And then I'm just going to let it spin and dry. I do want to mention that all the products that I use, I for the most part buy on Amazon, and I will have them all linked down in the description box below. I also would like to take a moment and mention my Patreon group. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. I do giveaways about weekly in there, and I also give away a lot of the tumblers and stuff that I make, and I want to give a special thank you to all of my KCC Diamonds who are my Patreon members. This is everyone listed out here, and we have a great time in the group. We do lives, we post, and we do giveaways. So thank you so much to all of my beautiful diamonds that are in the group. If you found this video helpful, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful day and take care.